Marcus had been coming to Mel's diner every Tuesday for 3 years, always ordering the same thing: black coffee, scrambled eggs, and wheat toast. It wasn't the food that kept him coming back, though Dolores made a mean cup of coffee. It was the familiar rhythm of the place that helped him forget, even for an hour, that his apartment felt too quiet since Sarah passed. That particular Tuesday started like any other. The morning sun streamed through the checkered curtains, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floors. The usual crowd filled their regular spots: construction workers grabbing quick breakfasts before their shifts, elderly couples sharing newspapers over pancakes, and a handful of truckers nursing coffee before hitting the road again. But something was different about Jenny. Marcus had watched the young waitress work for over a year now. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's order, who asked about your sick dog, who somehow made even the grumpiest customers crack a smile. Jenny moved through the diner like a dancer, effortlessly balancing plates and refilling coffee cups with a warmth that seemed to light up the entire room. Today, though, she was avoiding table 6. It was subtle at first. When the elderly man in the threadbare coat sat down, Jenny busied herself wiping down already clean tables. When he raised his hand to get her attention, she suddenly found urgent business in the kitchen. Marcus watched as Dolores, the other waitress, eventually approached the table with visible reluctance. The man ordered just coffee. 1 cup of coffee that he nursed for nearly 2 hours, his weathered hands wrapped around the ceramic mug as if drawing warmth from it. His clothes had seen better days: a faded blue jacket with patches at the elbows, pants that were clean but frayed at the cuffs. Everything about him spoke of hard times, but his posture remained dignified, his gray eyes kind despite the weariness etched in the lines around them. Marcus found himself stealing glances between bites of his eggs. There was something achingly familiar about the way the man sat alone, something that twisted in Marcus's chest like a half-remembered melody. When the man finally asked for his check, Marcus watched Jenny's face crumple for just a moment before she composed herself and walked over. The conversation was brief, conducted in hushed tones that Marcus couldn't quite make out. What he could see was the man's face falling as he patted his pockets, checking and rechecking for something that clearly wasn't there. Jenny's hand went to her apron pocket, then stopped. She glanced around the diner, her cheeks flushing red. Marcus saw her shoulders sag slightly as she whispered something to the man, who nodded slowly and began to stand. That's when Marcus understood. The man was hungry, probably had been for a while. And Jenny, sweet, generous Jenny, had been avoiding him not out of meanness, but because she'd already helped too many times. Marcus had noticed her picking up extra shifts lately, had seen the dark circles under her eyes. She was probably barely scraping by herself, especially with her little boy to think about. Marcus remembered that feeling. Not the hunger, he'd been blessed to never know that particular desperation, but the weight of wanting to help everyone and feeling like you were drowning while trying to keep others afloat. Sarah used to call it his savior complex, but she'd said it with love, understanding that his need to fix things came from a good place. Without thinking it through, Marcus stood up and walked over to table 6. "Excuse me," he said, his voice rougher than intended. The man looked up, and Marcus saw something in those gray eyes that made his chest tight, pride warring with need, dignity battling desperation. "I couldn't help but notice you were finishing up your coffee," Marcus continued, settling into the booth across from him. "I'm Marcus. I come here every Tuesday, and I have to say, eating alone gets old after a while. Would you mind if I bought you breakfast? I hate eating by myself, and you'd be doing me a favor." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, searching Marcus's face for pity or condescension. Finding neither, he extended a calloused hand. "Name's Frank," he said simply. "I appreciate the offer, but I can't." "Sure you can," Marcus interrupted gently. "We're just 2 guys having breakfast together. Nothing more complicated than that." Jenny appeared beside their table, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "What can I get you gentlemen?" she asked, her voice steadier than Marcus expected. Frank ordered quietly, "Just eggs and toast, nothing fancy," but Marcus caught him eyeing the stack of pancakes at the next table. "Make that the lumberjack special," Marcus told Jenny with a wink. "Extra bacon. Growing boys need their protein." As they waited for the food, Frank's story unfolded in careful, measured words. Laid off from the factory after 32 years. Unemployment running out. Too old to be hired most places, too young to retire. Living in his truck, trying to find work, too proud to burden his daughter who was struggling with her own family. Some mornings, Frank admitted, staring into his fresh cup of coffee, I sit here and pretend I can afford more than coffee. Just for an hour, I pretend I'm still the man who could take care of himself. Marcus felt his throat tighten. We all need to pretend sometimes, he said quietly. After my wife passed, I used to set 2 plates at dinner. Just couldn't stand the thought of admitting she was gone. When Frank's breakfast arrived, steaming stack of pancakes drowning in syrup, crispy bacon, eggs over easy just like he'd ordered, his hands trembled slightly as he picked up his fork. The first bite was slow, savored, as if he was trying to make it last forever. They talked about everything and nothing. Frank had been a machinist, took pride in work that required precision and skill. He showed Marcus pictures of his grandkids, his face transforming with love and loss. Marcus found himself sharing stories about Sarah, about the restaurant they'd dreamed of opening, about how the silence of his empty house sometimes felt loud enough to drown in. By the time Frank finished eating, something had shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, they were still strangers, but a recognition of shared humanity, of the thin lines that separate the comfortable from the desperate. When Marcus paid the check, for both meals, despite Frank's protests, he made sure to tip Jenny generously. But more than that, he slipped her his business card. I run a small construction company, he told her quietly. Always need good people. If you know anyone looking for honest work. Jenny's smile was radiant as she pocketed the card and hurried over to where Frank was putting on his jacket. 3 months later, Marcus still came to Mel's diner every Tuesday. But now he wasn't eating alone. Frank had cleaned up well once he had steady work and a small apartment. His pride had been restored along with his paycheck, and he insisted on alternating who bought breakfast. The morning Marcus had noticed Jenny avoiding table 6 had changed all 3 of their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. It reminded him that sometimes the most profound acts of kindness happen when we stop trying to save everyone and simply choose to see the person right in front of us. Jenny still worked at the diner, but now she had help at home. Frank's granddaughter had moved nearby for college, and she babysat Jenny's son after school in exchange for home-cooked meals and the kind of surrogate family that sometimes forms when people need each other most. As Marcus watched Jenny laugh at something Frank was saying while she refilled their coffee cups, he thought about how easy it would have been to look away that Tuesday morning. How simple it would have been to finish his eggs and leave, to let someone else's hunger remain invisible to him. Instead, he'd learned that the most powerful force in the world isn't love or money or fame. It's the simple recognition that we're all just people trying to make it through another day. Sometimes we're the ones who need help, sometimes we're the ones who can give it, and if we're very lucky, we learn that being both isn't a weakness but the very thing that makes us human.